Okay, welcome back. Duvid again, and just finished with Duties of the Heart. Very powerful book that changed my life and influences almost every single decision I've made up till today. And now I wanted to continue. I figure start right away with probably the second most influential book in my path till today, which is called Mesilus Yesharim, The Path of the Just. And this one's from Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzato, who lived about 300 years ago, was an Italian rabbi who made it to Israel, is buried in Israel. He's actually buried right next to Rabbi Akiva, and I prayed at his grave a few times. He's the author of many books that are widely studied, well known. This one you'll find many lectures on YouTube and Yeshiva University and all types of information, but I figured I'd do it anyways because the great influence it had on me. While I was in Or Samek in Jerusalem, I took a class from Rabbi David Gottlieb on another book called The Way of God, Derek Hashem, which is also extremely popular. And the Ramchal is the acronym for Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzato. Also wrote books on Kabbalah, and he's right before Hasidus starts. So the Duties of the Heart we just finished 1,000 years ago. It has a lot of Greek and Arab wisdom. This is just in the time of the Enlightenment, and the rabbis writing this in Italy at the time, and a lot of this information. This book is extremely well renowned and known. It's shorter than Duties of the Heart, and so let's just jump right in. And I'm going to be using the same site and translation as I used for Duties of the Heart. Introduction. The writer says, I've composed the work not to teach people what they do not know, but to remind them of what they already know and which is very familiar to them. For you'll find in most of my words only things which most people already know and do not have any doubt about. But according to their familiarity and to the extent that their truth is evident to all, so too is their neglect very prevalent and forgetfulness of them very great. Therefore, the benefit to be gleaned from this book is not from a single reading, for it is possible that the reader will learn very little that he did not already know. Rather, the benefit derived from this book comes from review and diligent study, for then he will be reminded of these things which by nature people tend to forget, and he will put to his heart his duties which he hides from. If you reflect on the current state of affairs of most of the world, you will see that most people of quick intelligence and sharp mentality devote most of their thought and interest in the subtleties of wisdom and the depths of analysis, every man according to his intellectual tendency and natural desire. There are those who toil greatly in studying the creation in nature. Others devote all their study to astronomy and mathematics or to the arts. There are others which enter closer towards the sacred, namely the study of the Holy Torah. Among them, some occupy themselves with halachic analysis of the law, and others with midrash and legal decisions. But very few are those which devote thought and study to the matter of perfection of divine service, of love, fear, clinging, and the other branches of piety. This is not because they do not consider these things as fundamental, for if you ask them, each one will answer you that this is the utmost importance, and that it is unimaginable for one to be considered truly wise if he has not fully comprehended these matters. Rather, their lack of devotion, of more time to it, stems from it being so familiar and so evident to them that they see no need for spending much time on it. Consequently, the study and the reading of books of this sort is left to people of not so keen intellect, almost dull intelligence. These types of people you will find diligent in all this, not budging from it until the situation has reached the point that if one sees a person engaged in piety, he cannot help but suspecting him of belonging to those of dull intelligence. The consequence of this situation is very evil, both for those who possess wisdom and those who do not, for it causes both types to lack true piety, thereby making it exceedingly rare to be found anywhere in the world. It is absent from the wise due to their insufficient reflection on it, and likewise to the non-wise due to their insufficient grasp of it. This situation has reached the point where most people Imagined piety consists of reciting many psalms, very long confessions, difficult fast, and immersions in icy water and snow. All of these things are incompatible with intellect, and which reason cannot be at peace. Thus, the true piety that is acceptable and cherished is far from what our minds conceive to us. For it is obvious that when a person does not feel a responsibility to do, will not occupy a place in his mind. Although the beginnings and foundations of piety are already implanted in every upright person's heart, nevertheless, if he does not engage himself in their study, he will encounter its branches but will not recognize them, and he will tread over them without perceiving that he is doing so. Observe the matter of piety and fear of love of God and purity of heart are not things innately implanted in a person whereby he would not need means to acquire them, such as sleep and wakefulness, hunger and satiation, and all the other responses naturally implanted in our nature. Rather, certainly is necessary to employ means and strategies to acquire them. There is also no lack of detrimental factors which distance a person from them, but correspondingly, there is also no lack of ways by which these obstacles may be held afar. If so, then how can one not need to devote time and study to know the truth of these matters and learn the means to acquire them and fulfill them? From where will this wisdom come in the heart of a person if he does not seek it? Since it is clear to every wise man the need for perfection of divine service and the necessity for its purity and cleanliness, for without this it is certainly not acceptable at all, but rather it is repulsive and despised, since the Lord searches all hearts and discerns all the imaginations of thoughts. If you seek him, he will be found of you, but if you forsake him, he will cast you off forever. What will we answer on the day of our rebuke if we have been lax in the study and forsaken that which is so incumbent on us to be the main thing which the Lord our God requires of us? It is conceivable for us to exert our minds and labor in logical inquiries which we are not obligated, in sharp discourses bearing no fruit, and laws which are not relevant to us, and that which is so great a debt to our Creator, we abandon it to habit and surrender it to rote practice. If we would not look and analyze what is true fear of God and what are its branches, how can we ever acquire it, and how can we ever save ourselves from the worldly vanities which cause our hearts to be forgetful of it? Will it not be forgotten and go away even though we recognize its necessity? Likewise, for love of God, if we do not exert ourselves to implant in it our heart through all the means which lead to this, how will it exist within us? From where will come the cleaving and the passion of our souls to the blessed God and his Torah if we don't give attention to his greatness and exaltedness, which instills in our hearts this cleaving? How can we purify our thoughts if we do not exert ourselves to cleanse it from the imperfections instilled in them by physical nature? And what of all our character traits, who likewise are in need of so much reflection and correction? Who will correct them and who will rectify them if we do not attend to them and are not exceedingly meticulous in this? If we truly examine the matter, we will discover the truth of this, thereby benefiting ourselves and teaching it to others to benefit them also. This is what Solomon said: if you will seek it as silver and search for it as buried treasure, then you will understand the fear of God. He did not say, then you will understand philosophy, then you will understand astronomy, then you will understand medicine, then you will understand legal decisions, then you will understand laws, but rather then you will understand fear of God. Behold from here that to understand the fear of God, one must seek it like silver and search for it like a buried treasure. Is it sufficient then what we have been taught by our forefathers and what is familiar to every intelligent person in a general sense? It is conceivable that we find time for all other branches of study, but not for this study. Why shouldn't a man set aside for himself at least fixed times for study if he is forced for the rest of his life and turn to other studies or affairs? Behold, Scripture says, hen fear God, this is wisdom. Our sages of blessed memory commented, hen hints to one, for Greek one is designated as hen. Behold, that fear of God is considered wisdom, and this alone is true wisdom, and certainly that which does not require investigation cannot be called wisdom. In truth, great amount of analysis is needed in all these things. If they are known in truth, not as imagination, deluded logic, how much more so to acquire them and to attain them? He who contemplates into these matters we'll see that piety does not depend on those things which the foolishly pious think, but rather on true perfection and great wisdom. This is what Moses, our teacher, peace be upon him, teaches us, saying, "And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you, but that you fear the Lord your God, and to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments of God and his statutes." Here he encompasses all the divisions of perfection of divine service that is desirable to the blessed God. They are fear of God, walking in his way, love of God, wholeheartedness and observance of all the commandments. Fear of God, this is the fear of the exaltedness of God, namely that one fears before him like he would fear before a great and awesome king, feeling abashed by his greatness before making any movement before him. All the more so when speaking before him in prayer or studying of Torah, walking his way. This includes all the matters uprightness, and correction of character traits. This is what our sages of blessed memory said: just as he is merciful, be also merciful. The general principle of all of this is for one to conduct all of his traits and all the variety of his deeds according to what is just and ethical. Our sages of blessed memory summarize this by saying, what is the proper path a person should choose for himself, whatever is harmonious for one who does it and harmonious for other people. That is, that which leads to the goal of true beneficence, namely strengthening of Torah and furthering of societal brotherliness. Love, that one has implanted in his heart love of God, onto his soul is moved to do what is pleasing to him, just like a heart is moved to do what is pleasing to his father and mother. He will be pained if he or others are lacking in this. He will be zealous for it and feel great joy in doing something of this wholeheartedness, that service before the blessed God be with purity of motive, namely for the sake of his service alone and not for any other motive. This also includes that one be wholeheartedly devoted in his service and not like one wavering between two sides or like one doing out of habitual rote, rather that his whole heart be devoted to this. Observing all the commandments, as the words indicate, namely to observe all the commandments in their entirety and in all their detailed rules and conditions. Behold, all of these general principles require lengthy explanation. I found that our sages of blessed memory have encompassed all of these divisions of divine service in different words arranged according to the order of steps needed to properly acquire them. It was taught in a Brisa and cited in several places in the Talmud. One of these is the chapter before the festivals in the Masechta Avodah Zarah. You shall guard yourself from everything evil. From here, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair derived, Torah brings to watchfulness, watchfulness brings to zeal, zeal brings to cleanliness, cleanliness brings to separation, separation brings to purity, purity brings to piety, piety brings to humility, humility brings to fear of sin brings to holiness, holiness brings to the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit brings to the revival of the dead. On the basis of this Bryce, I have undertaken to compose this work, to teach myself, and to remind others of the conditions of perfect service according to their proper levels. I will clarify the nature of each one of them, its divisions in detail, the way to acquire it, its detrimental factors, and the way to guard against them, so that I and whoever else finds it pleasing may read it in order to learn to fear the Lord our God and not to forget our duty to him. What the natural physicality exerts itself to remove from our hearts, the reading and reflecting will remind us and awaken us so that which we have been commanded. May God be our trust and keep our feet from stumbling, and may there be fulfilled in us the request of the psalmist, beloved of his God, teach me your ways, O God, I shall walk in your truth. Make one my heart to fear your name. So thus concludes the author's introduction. I mentioned before, the most popular video on my YouTube page, Tolz Yitzchak Rebbe, chanting the famous song Menucha V'Simcha. The Rebbe recommended to me to learn this. I remember I was first in Israel and I coming back to America, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to continue on my path of Hasidus and what would be. And the Rebbe said, study a chapter of this every day and you'll remain strong. And I did that. And just like duties of the heart, this is profound wisdom. It's life-changing. But the author mentioned these teachings require constant review. And even though the things appear very simple, that in essence, they're not simple. They require constant meditation and constant review. And hence, that's why I'm doing this. So let's start with the first chapter on man's duty of the world. Chapter 1, Man's duty in the world. The foundation of piety and the root of perfect service of God is for a man to clarify and come to realize as truth what is his obligation in his world and what he needs to direct his gaze and his aspiration in all that he toils all the days of his life. Behold, what our sages of blessed memory have taught us is that man was created solely to delight in God and to derive pleasure in the radiance of the divine presence, for this is the true delight and greatest pleasure that can possibly exist. The place of this pleasure is, in truth, the next world, for it was created expressly for this purpose. But the path to derive at the desired haven of ours is this world. This is what our sages of blessed memory said. This world is like a corridor before the world to come. This means that which leads a person to this goal and the commandments which the blessed God commanded us, the place of the performance of these commandments is only in this world. Therefore, man first placed in this world, so that through these means prepared for him here, he will be able to reach the place prepared for him, namely in the world to come, there to be sated with the good which he acquired through these means. This is what our sages of blessed memory said today to do them and tomorrow to receive the reward. When you look further into these matters, you will see that the true perfection lies only in clinging to God. This is what King David said, but as for me, closeness to God is my good. And one thing I ask from God, that I seek, that I may dwell in God's house all the days of my life, to gaze on the pleasantness of God. For only this is the good, while anything besides this that people consider good is really emptiness and mistaken worthlessness. For a person to attain this good is proper that he first exert strenuously to acquire it, namely to exert himself to cling to the blessed God through the power of deeds, whose consequence is this end. These deeds are the commandments. The Holy One, blessed is he, has put man in a place where the factors which distance him from the blessed God are numerous. There are physical lust, which he is drawn after them. Behold, he draws away and goes even further from the true good. Thus, we see that man is truly placed in the midst of a raging battlefield for all matters of this world, whether for the good or for the bad, are trials for man, poverty from one side versus wealth on the other. This is what Solomon said, lest I be satiated and deny you and say, who is God, or lest I be poor and steal. Tranquility on one hand versus suffering on the other, until the battle is waged against him from the front and from the rear. If he will be a man of valor, emerging from the battle victorious on all fronts, he will be the Adam Shalem, the complete whole man, who will merit to cling to his Creator and will emerge from the corridor to enter into the palace to enlighten in the light of eternal life. According to the extent that he conquered his inclination and lust and distance from the factors which distance him from the good, and exerted himself to cling to God, to that extent he will attain it and rejoice in it. If you look deeper into the matter, you will see that this world was created for man's use, but behold, man stands on the great balance. For if he is drawn after the world and distances from his Creator, behold, he corrupts himself and corrupts the world with him. But if he rules over himself and clings to the Creator and uses the world only as an aid to serve his Creator, then he elevates himself and elevates the world with him. For all creations are greatly elevated when they serve the Adam Shalem, the complete, whole, perfect man, who is sanctified with the holiness of the blessed God. This is like our sages of blessed memory said regarding the light which God stored away for the righteous. When God saw the light which he stored away for the righteous, he rejoiced, as written, the light of the righteous rejoices. And regarding the stones of the palace, which of the place which Jacob took and placed under his head, and the Midrash says, Rabbi Yitzchak said, this teaches us that they gathered together in one place, each one saying, let the righteous man lay his head upon me. Our sages roused us to this fundamental principle of Midrash Kohelet, saying, see the work of God. When the Holy One, blessed be he, created Adam, he took him and led him to pass before all the trees of the Garden of Eden, and said to him, see how beautiful and excellent are all my works. All that I created, I have created for your sake. Be careful that you do not become corrupt and destroy my world. The general principle of the matter, man was not created for his state in this world, but rather for his state in the world to come, only that his state in the world is a means towards his state in the world to come, which is his ultimate purpose. Hence you will find many statements of our sages of blessed memory all along similar lines, comparing this world to a place and time of preparation, while the next world is compared to a place of rest and eating what has already been prepared. For instance, they said this world is like a corridor, as I wrote earlier. Today is for their performance and tomorrow for receiving the reward. And he who toil on Friday will eat on Sabbath. This world is like the shore and the next world like the sea, and many other statements along the same lines. Indeed, you could see that no rational person can possibly believe that the purpose of man's creation is for his existence in this world. For what is man's life in this world? Who is truly happy and content in this world? The days of our life are 70 years, if by strength, or 80 years, yet their span is but toil and trouble. How many sorts of distress and sicknesses, pains and burdens, and after all that death, no one in 1,000 can be found to whom this world is granted plenty of pleasures and true contentment. And even such a person, if he reaches the age of 100 years already, is if one who already passed and disappeared from the world. Furthermore, if the purpose of man's creation were for the sake of this world, it would not have been necessary to imbue him with such a lofty and exalted soul, greater even than the angels themselves. Especially so when the soul finds no satisfaction whatsoever from all the pleasures of this world. This is what our sages teach us in the Midrash Koheles, but the soul will not be fulfilled. What is this analogous to? To the case of a common peasant who married the king's daughter. Even if he brought her all that the village possessed, it would be as nothing to her, for this she is the king's daughter. So too with the soul. If you would bring her all the pleasures of this world, they would be like nothing to her, for she is of the higher worlds. Likewise, our sages of blessed memory taught, against your will you were formed, and against your will you were born. For the soul does not love this world at all. On the contrary, it despises it. If so, certainly the Creator, blessed be He, blessed be His name, would never have created something for a purpose which is against its nature and despised by it. Rather, man's creation was for his state in the world to come. Therefore, the soul was placed in him, for it befits the soul to serve God, and through it a man will be rewarded in proper time and place. Thus, the world will not be something despised by his soul, but rather beloved and cherished by it. This is evident. Behold, after knowing all this, we will immediately realize the grave obligation of the commandments upon us, and the preciousness of the divine service which lies in our hands. For these are the means which lead us to the true perfection. Without them, this state will not be obtained in the least. It is known that a purpose is not attained without the combined contribution of all the means found and employed to achieve it, according to the capacity of the means, and their use will be the resulting achievement of the purpose, and any slight deviation found in the employed means will be very noticeable in the end result derived from the combined contributions. This is self-evident. It is obvious, therefore, that we must be meticulous to the utmost degree in the manner of observance of the commandments and the service of God, just like the merchants of gold and precious gems are meticulous to the utmost precision in weighing them due to their precious value. For the fruits of the commandments is the true perfection and the eternal preciousness, of which there is nothing more precious. To summarize what we have learned, the primary purpose of man's existence in this world is solely to fulfill the commandments, serve God, and stand up to the trials. The pleasure of this world should only be used for aiding and assisting him, so that he will have tranquility and peace of mind in order to free his heart from this service incumbent upon him. Thus it is proper that all a man's intent be solely to the blessed Creator, and that all of his actions, great or small, have no other purpose than to draw closer to God, blessed be He, and to break down all the barriers separating him from his masters, which are all the matters of physicality and things dependent on them, until he draws toward the blessed Creator like iron is drawn to a magnet. And if anything that he deems to be a means serving to drawing close to God, he will chase after it, grab hold of it, and not let go. And anything which he deems to be a detriment to this, he shall flee from it, as one flees from fire, similar to what is written, my soul clings after you, your right hand upholds me. For his coming to this world is only for this purpose, namely to attain this closeness by rescuing a soul from whatever hindrance are detriment to it. Behold, after we have known this general principle and clarify its veracity, we must investigate on its details according to its stages, from beginning to end, as Pinchas ben Yair arranged in his teaching, which we brought in the introduction. These steps are watchfulness, zeal, cleanliness, separation, purity, piety, humility, fear of sin, and holiness. Okay. So this weekend is the Shavuos holiday, and hopefully everyone accepts the Torah, tries to do the right thing and to increase in our wisdom. And, I'll continue to put these out there, if only to reminder to myself on why I chose this path and why I continue on this path. And a service to God, service to my Creator, service to the rabbis and people who helped to guide me on this path. And we see, this book, The Path to Just, written about 300 years ago, predates Hasidus and Musar. And just like the duties of the heart is foundational to almost everything that comes after it, so to this, the path of the just is very foundational to all the stuff that come after it. So, everyone should be blessed, have a wonderful Shavuos holiday, and we should accept upon ourselves to serve the Lord, to seek divine wisdom, have it penetrate our hearts. And, as the author just said, these simple truths need constant reminder, because in reality, they're not so simple and they need to be meditated upon. So, shalom, blessings.